personalities. We talked about whether you're an extrovert or introvert. That regardless of that, we can share our faith, and there may be some different ways that introverts and extroverts will go at it. But I think one of the things that is an issue for some of us, and when it comes to evangelism, is that oftentimes when we see people that are really, really good at evangelism, they also have that extroverted personality type. And if you have a more introverted personality, it's always kind of hard to watch them do evangelism and wonder how you could ever do like that. And so we talked about ways that people that are more introverted can share their faith. Tonight, what we were going to do tonight is jump into talking about just methods of sharing the gospel. So I was going to actually give you some different techniques tonight. And I changed that because it's Valentine's Day. I had no idea this many people would be here. But so I changed it to do that next week, because I thought next week people will be here and I think anybody's going to be tonight. It doesn't mean that this isn't an important topic. It very much is. But I wanted to make sure that if you were in an evangelism class, the biggest number of people possible would actually get different strategies of sharing the gospel. That's why I did that. So tonight we're going to talk about how it's never just our words, and we're going to deal with the topic of holistic evangelism. And when I say that it's not just words, I want to make sure you understand that it has to be words, but it's not just our words. Sometimes people have fallen into a way of sort of communicating the Christian message, almost by saying if I just show them, or if I just act like a Christian in front of them, which all is important, if I just love them, or if I just serve them, or if I just help them, then that will be sufficient. I think that is critically important, and that's going to be part of the topic tonight. But it's never enough, because it doesn't actually take them to what it means to know Jesus, or to understand what Jesus has done. That has to be communicated in a way, and I think that's through our words. But these connections are important ones to be made. I don't know if any of you know this book, Calvinism in the Las Vegas Airport. It's written by Richard Mouw. Richard Mouw is a theologian, philosopher. He served as the president of Fuller Seminary for like 20 years. Has written on all kinds of things from a Reformed perspective. But the little subtitle, I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not, but it's called Making Connections in Today's World. And he begins this book telling this story, and actually a number of different writers have used this story. It's about a screenwriter director by the name of Paul Schrader. I don't know if you guys know that name. He was the guy who wrote Taxi Driver. He wrote American Gigolo, and I'm telling this from this book because I've never seen this movie, not really even interested in it. But anyway, Paul Schrader grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, and he's like a major Hollywood figure now. He's like 78 years old, has written all kinds of movies, directed all kinds of things. He had a PhD in film from UCLA, so he's a big deal in Hollywood. He's in that Martin Scorsese. He runs like those categories. Anyway, he grew up Christian Reformed and went to Calvin College. And at one time, Richard Mouw was a professor of theology at Calvin College. So anyway, he was in that Grand Rapids crowd, the Christian Reform group, and all of that. And he ended up sort of walking away from the Reformed faith. And he did it. He had some just strong negative feelings about his background growing up as a Christian, growing up in the Reformed community, even when he was in college. And so he goes off and he leaves Calvin College, goes off and goes into film and all that kind of stuff. And he wrote a movie called Hardcore. And the movie is what the story is about in the book, and it's about making connections. And the story in Hardcore is about this family from Grand Rapids that was a part of the Christian Reformed Church, and this gentleman in the movie was played by George C. Scott, and he was an elder in a Christian Reformed church. And his daughter runs off. She was sort of became rebellious, runs off, and ends up in California in the pornography industry. And so this father, this elder in this Christian Reformed church, goes after her to look for her. And he runs into this young lady, this teenage lady that is, I can't remember her name. His name is Jake. But anyway, as he's trying to find his daughter, he runs into this lady, and she's actually a prostitute and had interacted with his daughter. And she was helping him to find his daughter. So they were in the Las Vegas airport, and this is what the name of this book comes from, the Calvinism in the Las Vegas airport, because this story was so impactful. This movie and that scene in the movie was so impactful to Richard Mount because he knew Paul Schrader, and he knew what Paul Schrader was going through. But anyway, he talks about this scene where they're sitting, waiting for a plane in the Las Vegas airport, and this woman is paying beyond belief, all into the prostitution and the life of that, brutality, all that kind of stuff. And she's trying to help this man, and she asks him about. She starts out by saying, "You're a pretty negative kind of guy. I wonder if it has anything to do with your religion." And then she asks him about his faith and about what kind of church he's a part of. And he then begins to just take this woman, a teenage prostitute, who never stepped in the church whatsoever. He just begins to take her through the 5 points of Calvinism. And just one after another, after another, after another. And then at the end of that, it was just like totally, and this is the point he's making, is a total disconnect between where he was and where she was. And even one other author, I read something that another guy who used the story talked about. He said he was talking about the doctrines of grace without grace. Talking about the doctrines of grace without grace. Okay? And this idea of our faith really being able to connect and relate to where people are. That's the point. As opposed to just simply just going through, the things that you know to be true and tell those things to people, as opposed to actually engaging people where they are and really valuing people as people. And that's one of the things that I think holistic evangelism does. And so holistic evangelism is about showing the gospel's actual connections and relevance to life. It's not about making the gospel relevant. The gospel is relevant. That's the point. It is relevant to life. It really is relevant to all of life. It's actually showing those connections to people. It's finding those points of connection for people. That's holistic evangelism. Harvey Kahn was he's a missiologist. He comes out of our circles. He actually is a professor of missions at Westminster Theological Seminary for years and years and years. And he was one of the guys. There are a number of significant guys. If any of you really appreciate Tim Keller, that influenced Keller, Harvey Kahn was one of them. The guys I'm using a good bit on Sunday morning, Edmund Clowney was one of them. These guys really influenced Keller. But anyway, he has a book called Evangelism, Doing Justice and Preaching Grace, and it's bringing together these ideas of how evangelism really is about communication and doing. It's about both of those. And he said, Harvey Kahn, in one of the chapters in this book, he says, I'm not talking about the relevance of the gospel. I'm talking about how to communicate the relevance of the gospel. How does it is relevant. How do you communicate it? How really telling is our telling? Are we really telling people about what this is all about? Or are we just giving people words that are totally disconnected from where they are? So understanding the comprehensive nature of evangelism. So evangelism, and I said this at the beginning, evangelism is proclamation. It has to be that. We are not doing evangelism if we're not sharing this message. It's not evangelism. So it has to be that, but it's not proclamation alone. Okay? It's all of these things sort of coming to bear on a real human being that you're interacting with. That you're not interacting with a robot or someone that doesn't have needs and concerns and things that are going on in their lives. And there are points of connection between where you are with Jesus and where that person is. And that's what holistic evangelism is about, is helping to make those. Missiologist Charles Van Eagle, he says this, that we find no dichotomy between word and deed in the church's witness. No splitting of proclamation from demonstration. It's just not. You just don't see that really in the Bible. And over and over again, you see these connections, and you see the way, and I'm going to give you a number of different examples of this, biblical examples, of how the situation, I'll just put this up, situational evangelistic missionaries, how the situation that the person finds themselves in becomes the point of connection with that person, eventually leading that person to a relationship with God. It's a real person. It's finding whatever the point of real need and concern is. And so in the Bible, you'll find evangelistic approaches that involve preaching and healing and teaching and acting out their message. And all of these, and I'm going to give you a slide to this effect in a moment, but all of these are Greg Foster, our assistant, was yesterday. He was in Presbytery, and he was preaching. Went through licensure yesterday. He was preaching, and one of the things he pointed out in his sermon, which is absolutely true, is that when you see these miracles that are happening in the Bible, one of the purposes they serve oftentimes actually many times they serve this purpose. They authenticate the person that's doing the miraculous. So Jesus doing the miraculous is authenticating him as a Messiah, or the apostles doing the miraculous is authenticating them as apostles, so that it's authenticating who they are as apostles or Messiah, and also authenticating the word that they're putting forth. Okay, but another reason why that we see these miraculous things in the Bible, these healings and all these things, is it's a little snapshot for us of the inbreaking of the eternal. Or let me say it another way. It's like a pushing in of the new world into the present world, so that what we were able to see is what God reconciling us through Jesus brings about. Do you understand that? That he brings about that the gospel therefore has a bigger thing than just saving an individual soul so that individual soul can go to heaven. The gospel really has this sense of transforming or bending back into order everything that has been put wrong. It sets wrong right. The gospel does that. And so these healing instances give picture. They allow us to picture the reality of what it will be when God makes all things new once again. And so it's an inbreaking. That's the way that sometimes theologians will talk about this. It's an inbreaking of the eternal into the present, so that we can actually look at it and go, oh, that's what's coming for all of us, okay? And so these healings are ways of communicating the reality of the gospel. Do you understand? And that's the point I'm trying to make, that this is all wrapped up in what the gospel is. And so then when you think about Jesus, and let me give you a couple of examples of Jesus' interactions. And one of them is when Jesus, and it's a profound passage in my mind, because it's the way Jesus actually sets up his public ministry. And this is in Luke chapter 4, verse 16 through 21, where he's talking about what his ministry is really all about. So it says a really excellent writer. He's a very good writer. But in it, he says this. He says, when Jesus exorcises demons, multiplies fish and loaves, walks on water, and so forth, he is showing how God's kingdom is coming to earth. How God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He is giving people a foretaste of the day when all that exists on earth is God's kingdom, because heaven and earth will have been unified in a way that leaves no room for evil, pain, or lack. All right, let's stop there just for a second. Let me see if you have any comments or any questions about this aspect of the holistic sort of nature of the gospel message, or even any concerns about it, because there's this gets askew sometimes. I mean, you talk about the whole social gospel movement, which we've mentioned before, liberation theology. All of those have basically seen salvation as being determined by sort of economic empowerment or racial empowerment, and that's certainly not what we're talking about here. But you can't swing. A lot of times we do this, where we swing the pendulum like that, right? There's a book that I used in my doctoral program called The Great Reversal, and it was about how in evangelicalism in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, there was really almost a movement called the Great Reversal away because of the influence of the social gospel movement. They were moving away from that because the social gospel movement had given up the gospel. It was just a social reality, social transformation. Comments, questions? Anybody? Any thoughts on this?
All these passages basically go back to faith.
They do. They're all showing faith in Jesus. And they're all
except the priest.
Yeah, except the priest. Yeah. And they're showing it in a comprehensive healing, in a comprehensive way. Others? Anybody? All right. So evangelism, I'm going to have you do a little exercise with this. Evangelism in terms of what the world needs. Okay? So let's just start thinking about what are some of the things that this world needs that the gospel message communicated connects to. Well, number one, and this is obviously the greatest thing, evangelism as a call to Christ. It is evangelism as the means in which people can be reconciled to God. That's the greatest thing, being reconciled to God. So it's always this vertical thing, okay? It always is that. Second, evangelism as a call to community. So this is a point of connection with people. People are People, I think, are lonely in the world. People are desirous of authentic community in the world. People want those kinds of things. What the message of the gospel does is connects us back to others, and in a way that should be. It's one of the reasons why we need to be able to show people to the best of our extent what an authentic community looks like in the life of the church. But evangelism is that. It's a call back to community. It's a call back to relationships with people who care for you and love you. Okay? Evangelism is a call to completion, to being truly human. I mean, Jesus was a true man, right? The true man. If you want to know what a true human being looked like, you have to look at Jesus. He was the one. He lived a life in which he loved the Lord his God with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loved his neighbor as himself. He lived a truly human life. And so evangelism to people whose lives are falling apart and people who seem to not in any way be able to figure out how to live in a way that's healthy and good. Evangelism is a part of the restoration of humanity. Okay? Evangelism is a call to celebration, which is just a reminder that being a Christian actually should be something that's joyful. I heard somebody, who was it? Was it Louis Carrillo? Actually, I think it was Louis Carrillo in our church was talking about when he first started thinking about Christianity. He thought it was just the least joyful thing it possibly could be. Back when I became a believer, when I was a teenager, I literally thought that Christianity and being joyful or happy or ever having fun were the opposite ends of one another. So I remember the first few months of my Christian walk, I intentionally tried not to smile. I'm not exaggerating. I really did that. I tried not to smile because I thought, if you're a Christian, you got to be really, really serious. And I want to be a really good Christian. But I mean, enjoying life. I mean, it's not. It's showing that the pleasures of life aren't just sinful pleasures. That they're things that we actually can enjoy, and making sure that people that are around us know that and see us enjoying life. Because evangelism is a call to that. So your living of your life isn't disconnecting people from the experience of joy. That is actually connecting them to it. Evangelism is a call to change, and even societal change. And I'm not talking about, I think we need to be careful here, especially in the world that we live in today. I think we need to be really careful in our world of moving people when you're talking about Jesus in a partisan kind of idea, partisan politics. Because I think we are living in a world today where politics is just destroying everything it touches almost. But I do think we need to help people to understand how. And I've said this before, how things like justice and beauty and all these things are a part of these things that sort of transform to something that's really good. That's a part of the gospel message. That's a part of what God wants. I think those are real points of connection with people who are hurting or who are concerned about people who are hurting. Okay? All right, so here's what I want you to do. We'll take a little bit of time on this, maybe 5 minutes on this one. So which do you feel the most helpful points of contact for you with your circle of non-believing friends? So here they are. So think about these things. Now the first one is a gift. I mean, people, whether they know it or not, people need Jesus, okay? But think about these other things in terms of non-believing friends you may have. And just spend a few moments just talking about what ways could you use some of these to maybe connect to some folks you know. And these may be people you work with, maybe people you've met out wherever, but it may be that you realize this person is really, really lonely, and they're on social media all the time because they're so lonely, right? Because they have no human connection. And being able to, helping them to connect to a body of people is a good way of sort of helping them to hear the gospel. So let's take a few moments on that, okay? So you got the question, next question. Which do you feel are the most helpful points of contact for you with your circle of non-believing friends? And here are the 5 things, okay? So spend a few moments talking about that. You want to come back?
Family, we have differences. As we all know. But our goal is that was what you said about number 3.
Yeah.
Jesus was the way to be a man It's a great example. You can leave anybody for that. It's a roundabout way to go back. Talking about Christ, who was it? What did he do?
I think last night too with Miami, since Miami's hard, it's a hard city. People can then.
But there's a big religious baseline. Latin community is what didn't happen, right? In a way. So that's the roots. The roots are there.
I mean, St. Louis is really good. It's up about 9 weeks still like a part of the
Yeah, but Latin community everywhere is always happening. They're already there somewhat. It's just connecting the parts. You know, Mike's students was talking about prayer. Are you all praying or are you just saying things? And I remember back in church, the prayer was just this thing you read. You just wrote big and angry. There was no thought, no heart, it wasn't a prayer. Just, I'm reading number 1, number 2, number 3. There was no thinking that went into it. Of course, the Catholic Church, everything.
Well, you grew up Catholic.
Yeah. Well, some places are different. Now, St. Louis obviously is a leader of liberating the church. And even where I went to school, it was a bit different.
Was it really?
Oh, Columbus, all that kind of stuff. Even relationship is something that the relationship with Jesus was never there, so to speak.
So that's in those situations.
Yeah. But, I think we have a base here. The good thing is everybody knows. Well,
Yeah.
So it makes an easy starting point. I think. Talk.
It's interesting because you even get to Marco Rubio, who's a strong believer, but there's still such a connection to the church. I mean, it's almost like you don't even address the church. Just have to go back to Jesus.
All right, everybody. Anybody want to share some of your thoughts with the whole group? Anybody want to share anything with the whole group?
We were talking quite a bit about community and how that is something that's personal to all of us. And of course it leads, you can zip between all of those. But community in Christ and community with each other is what a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah. And it is, you think even about things like small group ministry. I think you can have different. This is by the way, guys. You can have different kinds of small groups. You have small groups where they kind of close off you building deep relationships with people for the rest of your life. You can have small groups that are open always open to unbelievers coming into them. And that being a way of using community to help people to know the gospel. I've been talking to the ladies that are doing mobs right now. He says, since the garden, we live in a world filled with suffering, disease, poverty, racism, natural disasters, war, aging, and death. And it all stems from the wrath and curse of God over the world. The world is out of joint, and we need to be rescued. But the root of our problem is not these horizontal relationships, though they are often the most obvious. And so that's what people are going to see. They're going to see these horizontal things. And that's where, those are places of connection, and the horizontal things that everybody sees, right? Like who is not going to be thinking in America through this week, about what's happening now in Broward County. By the way, I just saw it was up to, I think, 32 kids got shot. Still 17. All human problems are ultimately symptoms, and our separation from God is the cause. The reason for all the misery, all the effects of the curse, is that we are not reconciled to God. It really is that. Right? That's what the gospel answers. Therefore, the first and primary focus of any real rescue of the human race, the The main thing that will save us is to have our relationship with God put right again. And that's the gospel message. It's connecting that vertical message to our horizontal realities. And that's what we see. All right, that's it. I'm gonna pray, and if you guys want to come up and talk to me, you can.